Great, so welcome. Hi, I'm Marianne Seven. I run the Center for Food and Resilience at ThinkFOOD, which still includes the Center for Food Studies. So some of you have been to the ThinkFOOD conference. It's 10th year. Amazingly, you've done this 10 years in a row, and some of you have been to all 10. Very impressive. So this is an annual event where we try to bring in experts from all over the food scene, because we want you to know each other, because we want you as experts to share what you're doing, the great work that you're doing with the broader public. It's a really great place to get to know people and learn what's happening. I'm excited about this year because we have a lot of really cool panels dedicated to making local farming work, which is an essential element of our food system. So I want to remind you of a couple things. If you checked in, you got your lunch ticket. If you haven't done that yet, make sure you do that before lunch. We have a pruning demonstration going on all day, so you're able to check in there. It's up the road here behind the Daniel Art Center in the orchard. So that's Tom Ingersoll doing a pruning demonstration. You can ask him any questions you want. We have some apple trees that were in pretty sad shape, and these can help us get them back going so we can have apples ongoing. And there are a number of other events, workshops happening. If you didn't get a program, you can go on up at the table. And we're going to have a networking event after lunch, 1 to 2 in here. We have lots of good materials. We want you to meet each other and learn more about what is going on here in Berkshire and a little outside. So our first panel, as you can see, is about land access, expanding the toolbox, working together to secure housing and land for local farmers. I want to introduce our panelists. They're going to take it there. So we have Jamie Potter, who's coming to us from American Farmland Trust. We have Callie Lucy from Land for Good, Lily Massey, Community Land Trust, recently working on her own now, and Mackenzie Greer from the Berkshire Natural Resources Council. They're all talking about land access, housing, and land for. So I'll let you take it away. Awesome, thank you. All right, hey folks. Welcome. I know it's early for some of us on a Saturday. Thank you all for being here. Marianne said, and after the introduction, I'm Jamie Potter. I'm the New England Program Manager with American Farmland Trust. She introduced my colleagues who are going to be co-presenting with me. We were invited to talk about land access, so we pulled together, we hope it's a sort of quick and pretty exciting workshop for you all on this topic. We're calling it Expanding the Toolbox, working together to secure housing and land for local farmers. So again, we just got an hour here together, so we're going to try to be brief. I'm going to sort of tee it off with just a little bit of context about some farmland conversion and demographic trends here in the region and in Berkshire County. Kenzie's going to talk about what is a conservation land trust and farmland protection tools. Colleagues from Land for Good will talk about the great work that they do across New England and access, succession, and transfer tools. We'll hear from Lily about what is a community land trust and some of the cool models that are really been pioneered right here in Berkshire County. And then we're hoping to leave a good chunk of time at the end for some Q&A and discussion. So briefly, what is American Farmland Trust? You've probably seen our No Farm Simply bumper stickers everywhere. We have a bunch of them, so please take them and plaster them everywhere. But in case you don't know what American Farmland Trust does, we are a national agricultural land trust founded in 1980. We have staff all across the country. We have 9 regional offices. I'm out of the New England office, but a lot of my work is right here in Massachusetts. And I have a special focus part of the time supporting Berkshire County land trusts and organizations. So it's been really a pleasure to kind of dig in more with the Berkshire County community. And we do this work through protecting farmland, promoting sound farming practices, and keeping farmers on the land. And one of the things that AFT does really well is that we pull together lots of data that we hope that local organizations and advocates can use to advance the work to save farmland across the country. So this data is from our Farms Under Threat State of the State study, which looked at conversion trends from a 15-year period from 2001 to 2016. And what this map is showing is that even though in New England we have maybe fewer farms than other parts of the country, we're losing a disproportionate amount of farmland that we do have. And if we project those same trends out to the year 2040, we can see that New England there still lights up in red. And if we zoom down into the level of Massachusetts, again projecting out to 2040, unfortunately we see that Massachusetts
is third in the country in terms of the percentage of agricultural land that's projected to be converted by the year 2040. So nearly 15% of our farmland is projected to be converted to non-farming uses, which is a little scary. What that translates down to is about potentially 74,000 acres of farmland could be lost or converted in the next 17 years, with 60% of that projected to occur on the state's best ag land, which would mean we would lose lots of jobs, lots of millions of dollars in farm output. And so this is really problematic, obviously. And when we zoom down into the level of Berkshire County, this is the data from that 2001 to 2016 study. We see that about 2,500 acres of Berkshire farmland were converted from 2001 to 2016. And this graphic on the right is from our protected ag lands database, which shows that over 80% of Berkshire County farmland is not permanently protected. And Mackenzie will talk a little bit more about what protection means in a little bit. But what that means for our farmland, and when we look at the 2040 data, so what's going to happen over the next 17 years potentially, is that potentially at least 5,200 acres of Berkshire farmland is likely to be converted by the year 2040. And that's under a business as usual scenario, which is a little scary, right? And on top of that, there's other compounding challenges for our Berkshire County farms and farmers. Obviously the high cost of farmland and housing is not news to all of you here in the room. Massachusetts, I believe, has the second highest farm real estate values in the country, third highest housing values. And looking at some of the census data from 2017, which is the most current ag census data that we have, about a quarter of Berkshire County farmers are actually new and beginning farmers. And so we know that new and beginning farmers face additional challenges such as access to capital, student loan debt, those kinds of things. And so how can we work together to support both the existing generation of farmers and the incoming generation of farmers? There's also limited succession and transfer planning. And Holly will tell you a little bit more what we mean by that. But 35% of farmers here in Berkshire County are over the age of 65. And we know that only about half of them have done any kind of estate planning or succession planning, meaning they haven't really made a plan for what to do with the land once they retire or something happen to them. About 20% of Berkshire County farmland is rented. And so what that could mean if there's farmers who are using that land, and that land is not protected, it's potentially subject to be transferred out of agriculture. There's also economic pressures, climate change impacts, stuff all of you here know are happening that are just really creating a really difficult situation for our farmers here in the region. And then just the challenge of kind of navigating all the different resources and support systems, which we're really blessed to have here, but for a lot of farmers, it's kind of hard to figure out who to go to, who to talk to. It can be kind of overwhelming. So that's one of the things we've been trying to work on together. And obviously many, many other challenges I haven't mentioned here. But one of the positive things is that over the last few years, we've been continuing to work together to try to address some of these challenges. So these are some photographs from a workshop series that we've partnered on with Land for Good, Berkshire Natural Resource Council, Berkshire Ag Ventures, the other folks in the room, FSA. These were some workshops we did in Adams, Dalton, and Williamstown called Planning for the Future of Our Farmland, trying to bring farmers together, connect them up with service providers and the resources, trying to kind of demystify the process and make it a little bit less scary. We've also done a number of land access workshops, so a little bit of a taste of what you're going to hear today. We've done it virtually, and this was the one we did last fall in Lennox. And my last slide here before I hand it off to Mackenzie is just to kind of show that when we're talking about farm access, it takes a village, right? It takes all these different organizations who are focused on all of these different sectors. Farm succession planning, affordable housing, infrastructure, land conservation, land use planning, business technical assistance and financing, public education and marketing. We have all these tremendous organizations and individuals doing this work across the county and beyond. They're not all included here, so sorry if I'm an organization. But just to say that today, the folks you're going to be hearing from are really being represented by the circles that are outlined in red. So we're just recognizing that we're just going to be talking about a slice of kind of what it takes to advance farmland access here in Berkshire County, recognizing that it really does take all of us working together to make it possible to keep farms in the hands of farmers. So I'm going to hand it off to Mackenzie now, who's going to talk to you about the great work of Berkshire Natural Resources Council.
Jamie. So I'm Mackenzie Greer. I'm the Community Programs Director for Berkshire Natural Resources Council. Let's see. We are the Regional Conservation Land Trust. Often we just refer to ourselves as a Regional Land Trust, but because we also have Community Land Trust here, I think it's really helpful to distinguish some of the ways that we do our work as a conservation land trust. So being regional, we work throughout Berkshire County. We work with local land trusts, we work with state agencies, but our primary area is Berkshire County. We're a little bit unique because we're the only land trust that works, conservation land trust that works throughout, but exclusively in the Berkshires. Through our work, and I'll talk a little bit more about the ways that we conserve land, we have conserved over 26,000 acres throughout the county. That's split into two main ways that we do our work. And I'll again talk a little more about that. We also have a big, and I'm not going to talk in great detail, but there's a little handout over there for someone who likes to explore open space. We steward 55 reserves that are open and free to the public. Some of those just are open and people can come and visit. Others have parking and trails and things like that. But we also do a lot of work with different partners, as I said. So we might work with the Department of Fish and Game, Mass Wildlife to conserve land. We work with the Department of Agricultural Resources on farmland conservation. We work in a variety of different ways with those partners. We might just facilitate some little aspect of a project to help get it into a flow toward conservation. And so I think just looking at our mission is really important to preserve and protect the natural beauty and ecological integrity of the Berkshires for public benefit and enjoyment. And that has a direct impact on how we do our agricultural preservation work. So, and just another point, I put that in bold. We have worked on over 5,000 acres of farmland protection, mostly since the 80s. So lots of projects that are never even held and stewarded by our organization, the NRC, but other organizations like the Mass Department of Ag Resources. So I think it's really important just to take a step back and understand a little bit about what conservation is. As I said, we do it in a couple of different ways. But when we talk about working with a private landowner, what we're doing is engaging in a voluntary process that is permanent. Jamie mentioned 80% of farmland in the Berkshires is not permanently protected. That's a really concerning statistic. What we're trying to do is ensure that in perpetuity, forever, there are protections on that land. That those protections are held and enforced by a conservation entity like us or at the Commonwealth. The key piece of this is that this process extinguishes most development rights pertaining to residential use, commercial, and industrial activity. When we're talking about agriculture and conservation of agriculture land, there's lots of additional rights that are enabled so that the land can be used flexibly and forever for agricultural purposes. But we won't see industrial development. We won't see houses to house people who are not farmers on that land. What those restrictions do is to encourage and to require careful stewardship of the land. Because again, we're thinking in perpetuity. We want to ensure that that land is available and in good shape for conservation and for agriculture. These sort of processes over here on the left describe the conservation restriction and an agricultural conservation restriction enable land to stay in private ownership. So as an owner of farmland or other type of well-suited conservation land. It can remain in private ownership, but there is an agreement between an organization like us and that private landowner to extinguish those development rights. So one of the ways that we can think about that is a little graphic called bundle of sticks. So this is something that we use rather frequently. We keep looking at conservation, keep learning about it. You'll see this referred to quite a bit. That bundle of sticks, if we say just have a house that we own, we hold that house in fee simple ownership. You might never think about the fact that that fee simple ownership actually contains multiple types of rights. When we're talking about working in conservation, land is staying in private ownership, aspects of those rights, again, are extinguished. So I crossed out some of the most specific ones: the right to build, the right to mine, drill. In the Berkshires, that's a little bit less relevant, I would say, than other parts of the country. To abandon, this is really important for farmland. The ways that we protect farmland now, we ensure that the farmland remains available for agriculture, which means abandonment becomes a real problem, and we really try to avoid and we protect against that. I put stars here on some of the other aspects, these other sticks that don't go away entirely, but have much tighter parameters around them as land is conserved. The other way that we conserve land is through straight fee simple ownership. So where we come in and we actually hold that full bundle of sticks. Those are some of those lands that we open to the public, where we build trails and do things like that. So through that process, we're conserving it as a conservation entity, and we're opening it up to the public. When we think about farmland, this is sort of a new concept, a new way for us as a conservation land trust to be working, is potentially to actually own farmland and to provide secure leases to farmers. This is not something we've historically done much of ever, but we're recognizing that there is a real need to do it now and into the future. So, can do about 3 minutes. Thank you, perfect. This is actually, it should have come out. So some of the trends that we are really thinking about that inform this work, inform our growth toward new strategies, new tools, new partnerships. As Jamie said, that cost of land being really high, the percentage of farmers who are aging out, the limited succession planning that's happening. Definitely the high amount of farmland that is not permanently protected. Those are really concerning trends and conditions that we as a conservation land trust have some ability to impact. You also know housing is really, really hard on farms and farmland. We're not going to get into that in great detail, but historically the tools that we use are not tend to exclude housing. That's a real problem, so we're trying to address that. And so the ways that we're doing this are to increase the conservation of agricultural land, to try and get more land conserved permanently, to encourage a whole farm approach where we're looking at the farmland, housing, the farmers, all as part of that sort of project. Rather than just thinking about, hey, we're protecting agricultural soils or the farmland itself, it's really about the whole farm. And again, trying to increase potentially a very powerful tool where we might be able to directly provide access to land. Thank you. So BNRC is well suited for this because of the past work that we've done, our work on land access, resource protection, and the fact that we're enabled to do a lot of this work, which many agencies are not allowed to do. And we work on these projects historically. They're complex and have a lot of great funding strategies involved that can really bear review. So these are the kinds of things we're looking at. New conservation tools, buy, protect, sell, long-term farm ownership, engaging in secure leases for farmland. We're working with Land for Good on some of these projects. It's a really exciting new area for us. And these partnerships that we're here today to talk about are really key, recognizing, as already has been said, we can't do it all ourselves. So we have to really expand on that, understand what each organization, group, entity can bring forward so that we can create this more complex strategy to address the needs. And I just want to mention education too. There's a real need to encourage greater understanding of the importance of agricultural land, the connection between agriculture and conservation. This is a piece that I have heard expressed, particularly by farmers again and again. People don't understand that farmland equals conservation. And more, we have to really make those ties together. Lots of nodding. So just one quick, that's my role. I was quick, because that might have been I just wanted to share one example project. This is us kind of slow stepping into this process. We're working with Farm and Transition in Clarksburg, where a farmer needed to get out. She needed to leave her farm. She had a successor identified. But the transfer couldn't happen immediately. So we're stepping in, we'll be buying this farm, holding it, providing a secure lease for about 3 years, and then we will convey it protected to this new farmer. It will include protections on that house to make sure that it remains affordable. It also includes farming infrastructure. The basement is actually like a barn space. And that's a really exciting one for us because it is sort of combining all of these types of tools and interests together. So I did it, right? I made it.
Hi, everybody. I'm Holly. I'm with Plan for Good. And so our mission is to ensure the future of farming by moving areas more securely on more land in ways within the land. And we do this through a variety of ways already mentioned by my colleagues. We work a lot with land access and tenure, and I'll go into what each of these things mean a little bit more in depth, and land transfer and succession planning. So Land for Good is unique in how we provide services to folks. We provide a lot of one-on-one consultation. We do a lot of education. We have a massive database of resources that we maintain and are consistently adding and upkeeping new additions to it. We collaborate with other organizations. As everyone's mentioned, we need a team. We work with a lot of defensive land trusts, facilitating leasing agreements, helping people figure out the best land access method, whether that's ownership or leasing. Specifically with farm land access and tenure. So tenure means to hold. And in order for you to have secure tenure, you need to have rights inherent in that tenure. You need to have an agreement that upholds and defends those rights. That is massively important. A very common saying is that a lease is only as good as your ability to defend it. You need to be very clear about what's in that document. And same with your purchasing. You need to be very clear about the agreements and the rights that you'll have on that property. If you have given some of those rights to a conservation easement, and the person you're buying from do so, that's going to affect how you can use it. So we have some really amazing tools to help build leases. We help people get their leases to the point where they're ready for an attorney to look over it. We are not attorneys. We definitely need an attorney to read through all of that and make sure everything is legal and ready to go. But we help get it to that point so that you're spending less on legal fees. We work with different programs that offer grants for people to get technical assistance. So sometimes our fees can be covered by that as well. We do offer up to 2 hours of no cost consultation service also. And we have so many cool resources on our website. We have this build lease tool, which I'll show you more down the line. And we have some amazing tools that help educate you about different methods of land access and tenure. So this diagram over here is another way of looking at the bundle of sticks. And this is included much larger and much more detail in this book, Farm Access Methods, decision about it. And you can download this for free on our website. I do have some flyers on the table that give you instructions on where to find this and a bunch of other downloads. But this particular diagram of the bundle of rights or bundle of sticks shows you how your rights move from being entirely yours to being owned by other parties, depending on the type of tenure method you chosen. So obviously, as if you own a property outright, which is also known as fee simple ownership, Mackenzie mentioned, all of those rights are yours. As you move down the different gradient of even ownership, you might have partial ownership, which happens sometimes when you're owning land through an LLC or in collaboration and partnership with other people. You're losing some of those individual rights, but that can make land more affordable, make it more accessible. So it's always cost benefit analysis, weighing different methods. And then we get to leasing on the other side, as well as licensing and permitting, which is much more rare, but still sometimes something that happens. With farm succession and transfer planning, as Jamie said, a lot of land is held by people who are getting ready to transition out, and they may not have identified a successor yet. So we have, and I'll show you this resource later on as well. We help co-host a website called Leeward Farmland Finders. This is a really great tool for connecting folks, farm seekers to landowners or equity farmers. And then we help facilitate a lot of the in-between communications. We provide succession schools to educate people about the succession process, and we have one coming up this winter in Berkshires.
Pittsfield, right?
Yeah, in Pittsfield, exactly. And we also really do try and connect people with a team of advisors. Like I said, we need accountants, we need attorneys, we need financial advisors, tax professionals, especially with the succession or transfer plan, because there's a lot of different assets that are going to be transferred. And again, we have downloads on our website specifically for succession and transfer planning as well. And we also do a lot of collaboration. We work with different kinds of land trusts, as I mentioned, different kinds of service providers. We're working on building a database of specialized service providers, like attorneys, accountants, et cetera, that we can have our fingertips ready to share with people. Right now, it's kind of a lot of pooling of different resources from different places. So we're with other organizations as well, trying to create this database. And as I mentioned, we've got the succession pool coming up, and we have on December 5th, nuts and bolts farm leasing that Landhood is co-hosting with American Farmland Trust. Jamie will be there, and our Massachusetts field agent, Jay, will be there as well. And so that's really exciting. We have all of our events on our website, so stay tuned. Things come up all the time. And we have a ton of resources. So this is the website I mentioned, Meeting with Farmland Finder. As a farm seeker, you can create a profile on this website, and it will help connect landowners that might be searching for someone with your particular skills, connect with you. And on the other side of the coin, you can post a property listing. For any farm seeker, we recommend your first step is a business plan, and that comes into the team of advisors that you may need. That is really helpful for a landowner who may be reviewing your profile, and if you're going to have a conversation with them, you need to know what you're talking about, know your resources, know what you need. As you're searching for land, the kind of land that you're going to find is going to be dependent on your business idea. What are you going to want to raise on that land? Then you can look at soil testing. You can look at any easements that might already be on their land access, the markets, but you can't know any of that if you haven't created a business plan to begin with. So we have a bunch of different toolboxes. We have information related specifically to farm seekers. We have information related specifically to succession and transfer planning. Landowners, you might be working with somebody who's not a farmer, they just own land, they want to lease it out. We have our bill lease tool. You can just put in information in here and it will generate a draft of the lease with legal terminology already in the document. And then you can meet with us, have us look over it with you, make sure things make sense, and then take it to the attorney. I'm Linda Massey, and I'm a community land trust advocate and work for a member of the community, the Berkshire Community Land Trust. And here to talk about the final tool, or not the final tool, but the final tool that we're discussing today, and one of the many tools in our toolbox for securing farmland and housing for small scale farmers and Berkshires, and that's the Berkshire Community Land Trust and the Farmers Desert Farmers Program. So really quick, to give you a quick rundown of what a community land trust is. Community land trust is a democratically governed non-for-profit organization that removes land from the speculative market and holds it on behalf of the community for a variety of purposes that are listed there. And in this way, the community gets a say in how that land gets used. The land is held in perpetuity. It can no longer be bought and sold. And another unique and key aspect of the community land trust model is that it separates property from the land on which it is built. Meaning that the land is decommodified, cannot be bought and sold. However, those either leasing community land trust land, who live on community land trust land, work on it, can own anything that is built upon the land. So that includes buildings, infrastructure, improvements to the land, such as orchards. And this is a key aspect because in ownership of the property and not the land, individuals can build equity in these things, as well as are incentivized to building that equity to keep caring for the infrastructure, the buildings, and caring for the land. One community land trust that is, there's over 200 in the country, and we have a local community land trust here in the Berkshires, and that's the Berkshire Community Land Trust. It was founded in 1980. It currently consists of 3 sites, and most notably, one of our sites is Indian Line Farm, which most of us know and love. Now placed in Berkshire Community Land Trust trusteeship in 1999, Indian Line Farm demonstrates the advantages of having a farmstead on community held land, in that because the land is already taken out of the equation, it's held in trust, the farmer, or in this case Liz, only has to purchase the infrastructure and buildings, meaning that the land debt is removed from the startup costs, which is meaning that Liz does not have to shoulder the burden of land debt. And also in her ownership of the buildings and infrastructure, as well as improvements to the land, that can even mean soil quality. She's been able to build equity over the years for her and her family. So when it comes time to sell, she will get a return on those investments. And last but not least, there's a resale formula that keeps the site affordable for future farmers. And when talking about tenure, the thing with the community land trust is that there is a land use plan that is developed with each site that is acquired, and that, as the name suggests, that's how the land is going to get used. And in this case, saying, okay, this will forever be in perpetuity land for agricultural use. And a land use plan is also, what I love about it is that it shows that when a site is acquired by a community land trust, it's not just specifically for agriculture, it can serve a variety of purposes. So you see here that on the corner there you see Liz's house and the barn, and that's designated for any sort of buildings. Then there's the tillable agricultural land, saying this is the land for agricultural use. And then these buffer areas, Indian Line Farm is surrounded by sensitive wetlands that need protection. So there is actually a conservation easement placed on top of the land use plan, and saying that these zones are meant to be conserved and protected. And witnessing the success of Indian Line Farm, as well as witnessing, as we talked about, the rising insecurity of housing and land for farmers in the Berkshires. In 2021, the Berkshire Community Land Trust started the Farmstead for Farmers campaign with, I wrote down the mission of conserving, to support the preservation of agricultural land and livelihoods, ensuring the vitality of communities and the environment for generations to come.
So seeking farmsteads, and the use of the farmstead, the word farmstead is intentional rather than farmland. Because as mentioned previously, it's great to preserve farmland, but then it's like, well, where's the farmer going to live? And in the community land trust model, with the Farmsteads for Farmers program, we're saying that housing is guaranteed in access to land. So you're not only are you getting secure access to land with the 98-year automatically renewable, automatically inheritable lease, you are also getting secure housing. That is significantly more affordable because the price of the land is taken out of the equation because it's been decommodified. Just to make sure. And then, oh yeah, and then right now, the Farmsteads for Farmers program is in the process of securing its first farmstead, and that's River Run Farm, located right outside downtown Great Barrington. It's already being stewarded by Anna and Rob of Off the Shelf Farm. They've been able to bring all of their scattered across Berkshire mobile chicken operations onto one site. And this is a brief video that Mary can help me with. Already queued up. There's me. Yeah, so it essentially, this video, May 19th, 2000. It just, yeah, May 19th, 2020 of this year. We had an event on River Run Farm, a community event, not only introduce River Run Farm to the public.
I'm so late.
And also to reintroduce the Farmsteads for Farmers campaign to the Berkshire community. So this video offers a brief outline of what the Farmsteads for Farmers program is and what the River Run site is and what it means for the future of farming in the Berkshires.
May 19th, 2023 was the day that Farmsteads for Farmers was born on River Run Farm in Great Barrington, Massachusetts.
This is an important piece of agricultural land that this community needs to take action to save.
Community land trusts, like the Berkshire Community Land Trust, they work by raising money to purchase the land and then giving long-term renewable leases to the farmers. Because the land trust owns the land, it can never go back on the market. It's a model that protects land and builds economic resilience for the farmers.
This is an extension of the commons that we have eroded over the last few generations.
The key to a thriving community is a resilient local food supply.
Each town, and in some cases each village in each town, had their own grange, which meant there was enough farmers to fill those grange halls on a regular basis.
It's about all of the farmers in our community and whether or not they have secure land access. And it's all the farmers that we don't have in our community yet because they cannot have access to land.
If we want to build that back, we need to have enough farmers to fill those halls.
In fact, it's a part of a global network of agricultural gardens and small farms across the world that reside on communally held land.
Farmsteads for Farmers begins right here, right now, today on River Run Farm.
Keep this day and this place in mind. There's much more to come.
We need way more. We need River Run again and again and again.
Last thing I'll mention is we can get into more detail during the question and answer period, but for more information, you can go to the Berkshire Community Land Trust website. You can learn about land use plan, how to become part of the community land trust, how it works, all the fun little nuts and bolts. No, that's good.
No, thank you, that was wonderful. You can now move pretty late that you won't have to lay your eyes.
That's true.
So there's a lot of information there. I'm sure you have questions. We've got questions for anybody on it and anybody on Zoom. We haven't forgotten about you. So your books on Zoom. My colleague Kathy will let us know if you have a question from Zoom. So I'll open it up to anybody who wants to talk to our presenters.
And we were all on time, so we actually have sufficient time for Q&A, discussion, any burning questions. As I said, some of you walked in, weren't able to hear my intro, but I had a slide kind of showing that, we represent some organizations that just a piece of the organizations who are really needed to help make farmland access possible. And so it really does take a village, as I said, and some of you are those other organizations in the room, and so we really value your questions, your ideas, other thoughts about further collaborations. So please take it away. Any questions?
Nice to see a lot of familiar faces in that video.
Yeah.
I lost a lot of these parts of the.
Yes, you didn't hear much of the earlier ones.
That's okay. We can send it around after.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get it. Hold on, Mars, can you go ahead? What? Go ahead. Oh, okay. Hi, I'm Mars. Thank you to everybody that presented. I wanted to ask Lily a specific question. You mentioned in regards to Indian Line Farm that there's a resale formula to keep the land affordable for future farmers. I'm wondering what that formula looks like if also Liz is receiving compensation for her added improvements to the area.
Yes, the resale formula is pretty simple. It's the current replacement cost adjusted for deterioration. So if let's say Liz wants to sell and someone comes along and says, oh, I want to purchase the buildings and infrastructure and have a farm on here, they'll look at all the current infrastructure from the buildings to the barns to irrigation, everything. They'll create a formula of how much that will cost, adjusted for deterioration depending on how old it is, and then that will be the resale value. So in that formula, if Liz has made improvements to the land, one really cool thing is actually they found a way to build equity out of improvements to the soil. So they had some soil scientists come down from UMass Extension, take soil samples at the beginning in 1999 of Indian Line Farm, and then they've come back recently and found that through her farming practices that the soil quality has increased. And I don't know the actual technical details of it, but they've managed to put a monetary value per square foot of the soil, so that when someone comes around and wants to purchase the farm, Liz is actually going to be able to get a return on all of the investments that she's put into increasing the soil quality. And through that resale value, as I mentioned previously, it's really great because it's not just the farmer's not just leasing the land and leasing the housing, because they actually have ownership and because they actually are able to build equity out of that ownership and improvements to land. They're incentivized to care for the land. You see a lot of conservation, not but conserved land in the Berkshires. All of the corn, the cornfields that you see, most of that is chemicals and monocrops, and there is no incentive for the farmer to care for the land. And so the farmer is just going to do as much as they can to get the most out of what they have. But in this case, Liz and other farmers are able to, build equity out of their investments in the land. So, thank you. It was over here. Yeah.
So I'm confused about Molly Comstock's role. She's trying to get her own farm through BNRPC, but she's also heading up this other effort, the Farmland for Farmers, that maybe doesn't interact with that one. I'm confused.
So the Farmstead for Farmers program was started when Molly had a handshake lease agreement, and then through no fault of her own lost that agreement to the land. And she came to the Berkshire Community Land Trust and said, and they saw that she couldn't afford to find not only housing, but a place to farm. And it was through that need that the Farmstead for Farmers program was originally initiated, and Molly became a speaker and an advocate for the Farmstead for Farmers program, and it was initially started to look for land for Molly, and she would be the pilot farmer for the campaign. But this site came up for River Run. it wasn't really working. It wouldn't be a good fit for Molly because she didn't want to start on land that she needed to basically start from scratch. And that takes years and years of building up the soil quality. And with Many Forks Farm, here is a farm that was already established, already worked for so many years. And so Molly, and then talk more about that, but that's how that happened. She found a woman who was willing to transition or like give over her farm to her. And the River Run site was perfect for Ann and Rob because they also needed a site to combine their different operations.
I think it's a bit of kismet. It's people doing similar work and trying to share resources, share learnings, and that there's this network. And throughout Molly's process to find secure land, we had helped her at various points when she was looking at a site and she was trying to say, does this have conservation potential? Because the community land trust model, as I understand it, the land is held in trust, and so the land itself is taken out of that ownership and need for affordability, right, or to access. What we do generally is to lower the value of that land as much as possible by permanently restricting it, and that restriction has a value. And so the per acre value is way, way down when we say it's not available for housing or commercial activity. And so both models can work really well in different situations. In Many Forks Farm, it was more that that site wasn't working great. Sharon Wyrick, who had established this farm 10 years earlier, turned it from a hayfield to a really wonderful CSA in a food desert. And she was looking to transition. She started that farm when she was 60 years old because she wanted to create something that would be passed to a new farmer. And she hadn't yet found the right person when we started talking with her, and met at one of the workshops that AFT and Lambergood put together. So sort of at the same time, we're talking to Molly, she's working with the Community Land Trust. I start talking to Sharon, and I kept saying, gosh, I wish Molly and Sharon could talk. But the locations are too different. It's not where Molly's looking. Ultimately, they connected on their own and sort of both called me in the same week saying, hey, guess what? And I'm like, oh, let's come together to talk about this. So it just happens that in that particular case, the model worked for a permanent conservation mechanism that's not quite the community land trust, but is sort of an enhanced version of what we've been doing to try and include that house and get Molly that secure access to land and to farming that she needed. And also then continues the operation of the Many Forks Farm CSA long into the future.
Yeah, and like once again, that just goes to show you it's not a one-size-all-fits solution. It's like in one case, maybe the Berkshire Community Land Trust would work for her, and it didn't work out at the time, and so she goes over there. And like that's why it's so important to have a variety of options. Yeah.
And the title of this workshop, expanding the tools on the time, right? So I think that's really one of the points we really want to hit home here is that, there are these sort of growing number of different tools that we can use. Conservation, land trust use a sort of certain suite of tools that's being expanded to be more inclusive of agriculture and thinking more holistically about the farm and affordability. We have these community land trust models. There's a lot of stuff in between, and it really takes these relationships, right? Like all of us kind of knowing each other, coming to events like this to the point that then we can kind of play matchmaker and really try to support people and do that hand holding so we can have these really exciting outcomes, which, these different organizations weren't here or we weren't as in close relationship with the farmers would be much harder to kind of navigate on their own. Bailey.
Yeah, thank you all for your presentation. My question was, you alluded to kind of incentivizing farmers to put their land into land trust and conservation. And can you speak a little bit about what that compensation looks like or what they should get from it? How we can make that a little more.
Thank that really nicely. Want to start with that? Yeah.
So in I'm going to say sort of a traditional land trust, conservation land trust model. So I'm not speaking for the community land trust model, but if we look at farmland in the Berkshires and I would say beyond, but very often the farms that are coming to us or are part of this agricultural landscape, they're flat. They have a range of soil types. Some are very rich soils. Some are going to be rockier, hillier because of the location that we're in. Very often these have lots of frontage along a road because of the nature of our farm fields and just the historic development patterns. Those are ripe for development. What does someone who wants to build housing look for? Flat, open, good views. That's going to bring their values up, okay? So when we're working with someone who is motivated to conserve their land, they want to see their farm remain a farm, but they're transitioning out, they can go through this process of evaluating what is the value of a restriction that can be placed, which I think is the root of your question. So in the kind of farmland that I was just describing, we often see that the value of that restriction, that voluntary extinguishment of the development rights, sometimes is 80% of the value of the land. So if you've got land that in total is valued at $1 million, that restriction value can be close to $800,000. That's a big chunk of the value of that land. Very often when we're working with farmers, so much of their life is invested in that land. They may not have an IRA, they might not have much in savings at all, but what they have is the value of that land. And so they're motivated to conserve it, but they need to get the cash out of it. It's their retirement, it's their ability to pass it on to the next generation. And so that restriction value is something that we either through the Commonwealth or through a private process can pay the landowner, often a very high percentage of that, to help them get the cash that they need out of it, but also meet their goals of conserving that land. And it happens in a variety of different ways. So this is kind of a simplified description of the process.
And then following that, the chunk that is left, so if it's a $100,000 or $1 million property, there's that $200,000 left, which is so much more affordable for the incoming farmers. We will purchase that at that value after the easement has been sold. So it also really helps with land access and affordability.
And the magic is that in a perfect scenario, right? Let's say we were able to get that farmer the $800,000. They sell it for $200,000. They still got their $1 million and they didn't have to sell it to a developer, right? Like that's sort of the beauty of conservation. If you can figure out the complexity, that's the challenge of the land trust community, to figure out how the heck to get the landowner's full value. With the state EPR program, they do pay most of that. If we don't qualify for that program, there's other grants. The land trusts sometimes have to privately fundraise. Sometimes the town kicks in if they have Community Preservation Act funds. But that's really the hard work of the land trusts and partners to kind of figure out how we can try to get farmers at full value when possible. And sometimes landowners are able to be more generous. Maybe they don't need that full value. So there's what we call a bargain sale. They're able to kind of donate a portion, basically not need to accept the full value of those development rights. They can get certain tax benefits. And that can really, really help conservation go much more quickly because it removes the burden on the land trusts from raising all that money.
And it can help the community too in those locations. Oftentimes the people who are going to come in and develop that land are not from there. And so the interested parties in that area, the neighbors, the town, etc., they have an interest in protecting and conserving that land so that it is not lost and it retains its, even if it's just aesthetic, keeping that open and beautiful. So they will chip in, like Jane just said, and sometimes help fund the cost of that easement to keep that land preserved.
Can I check out our Zoom?
There are two questions on Zoom. So the first question is, have any public schools created or considered creating educational farming sections on their campuses? The Great Barrington Agriculture Commission has advocated such an initiative at Berkshire Hills Regional School District in their planning for a new high school.
Anyone speak to that in the room?
So, say it again, public school.
Public schools creating or considered creating educational farming sections on there.
Educational farming courses, classes at public schools. Great idea. I don't know if there are any around here. Anybody else know this has happened?
It is definitely come up in conversation. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, this would be, you know, that's very capital and very programs. Both ag schools, not in Berkshire County, but in.
Big Farmers of America, that, we're not Everett, maybe?
They have a small chapter.
Yeah.
I mean, Monument technically has a small chapter. It's not so active, but they have a port and other ag courses.
Right. Speaks to the education piece that you were talking about, getting the word out, and we need future farmers because, as you said, you have an aging population, so it would be a good move for public schools. We do some of that here. We're not public schools, but we do some of the target.
Jamie, the comment on the networking, and Jamie and I were contacted recently by somebody who is interested in creating a public school vocational farming program, and gives the example of something that's happening in Connecticut, and apparently there is federal money. So they, through a third party, got connected to Jamie and me, and we're like, we don't know anything about that, but sure, we'll talk to you, right? And that's sort of where the conversations start happening. It's just talking and connecting, and it may take a while, but that energy is what moves forward. Right, so
That call
community. Great, so community member, thank you, but that's good, that's fantastic. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, one has 5 greenhouses. I worked in your cultural program for a little while. It's a different, it's not necessarily ag directed, but it has kind of the infrastructure there. It has like incredible potential.
Okay, I know that one has 5 greenhouses with great potential.
We're schools right now. I want to mention that iconic high school in Pittsfield, which is transitioning to an all-vocational school. They have a horticulture program that will have some tie over, not specifically agriculture, but
yeah, same
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
Iconic in Pittsfield and Monument in Great Barrington, for those of you who are not nearby. Go ahead.
Hugely thankful for all your efforts you put into farming access and affordable housing. I think it's excellent. Do you feel like there's any ability to work with some of the older CRs to try to bring in elements of having those lands be farmed or made available for affordable housing? Because I just, you know, thinking about some of the properties that I've seen that are dated and with older CRs, it tends to lend itself more to like an affluent second homeowner country estate with a home that's basically occupied maybe a couple weeks out of the year and land that's really barred from access for anybody. So is there a way to like work with these older ones to kind of bring them up to date and get more relevant to our needs today?
First, tell us what a CR is.
Conservation restriction or APR, agricultural conservation restriction. And then also I guess the idea is like having these so that in the future, if we have other needs that we're not envisioning today, that we can have them be reworked so that they can actually meet the needs of our society in the future.
It's a great question. So conservation restrictions were were one of the primary tools that we used to conserve land. More appropriate for farmland has been an agriculture preservation restriction that adds in a lot of flexibility for farmland uses. Most older conservation restrictions and all new ones today have a provision to allow farming and agricultural uses. The challenge is that when it's an agriculture preservation restriction, there's a lot of extra detail that's provided about how it can enable active farming. So it is a little bit more limited when it's an old conservation restriction, land that's has an old conservation restriction on it. They can be amended. We have done this before if there's a very clear process for it. We did this in Alford recently where an old APR or an old CR actually was amended to include some additional land and added active agricultural language. And that allowed a farmer to come in and mostly native nursery propagation. So it can happen. Housing is really challenging for these old CRs because they specifically extinguish a lot of development rights. Very often there was a housing envelope or an area that was excluded from the conservation restriction that remains available for development. The challenge is like, what kind of house was there? Could that be modified to enable some affordable housing? It's possible. In a lot of instances, it is rather challenging because we're sort of going back and retroactively trying to do this work. Housing is a huge piece of this that is, it's sort of the history of conservation land trust work that I'm challenged by. And yet there's a lot of possibility, I think, in the future for, one, we're much more careful about what land we conserve. There are some opportunities within agricultural preservation restrictions to enable housing to happen, both for farmers and farmland owners, as well as farm worker housing. It's a much more challenging piece of this puzzle. And this is why it again comes to these deeper partnerships. We're not housing folks. I have a background in community development, so you know, I have some sort of past work in this area, but we have the Southern Berkshire CDC and Hilltown CDC, you know, entities, community land trusts that are really interested in seeing housing become incorporated and have experience in doing it. So we're interested in seeing it happen, but we don't have a ton of experience in it.
So we have run out of time, but these people will be here. I'll get your time back.
Well, no, that's okay. I'll just like add one last thing to what Mackenzie said, and then I'm gonna make a pitch for a couple things before we let you go. Just to add, yeah, in terms of like these added tools in the toolbox, right? So like for the example of these older conservation restrictions, we have these sort of newer tools called a private APR, which is basically like what the state typically holds, but a land trust hold it, and those are more flexible. So those could be used as like overlays over older CRs. You can add certain cool, more flexible affordability provisions and include the house and do some more nitty-gritty things, which we didn't put in the presentation because we didn't want to overwhelm people. But just to say there are more tools in the toolbox, it absolutely requires partnerships. Not everybody was strong in this presentation, as I said right up front, in terms of all those bubbles that I showed. But I think, yeah, that's the value of working together in partnership. The last thing I'll say, again, just another plug for this workshop we're putting on December 5th called the Nuts and Bolts of Farm Leasing. Andy's going to be on the panel, Landford's going to be there. We're going to talk about some really cool examples of a local Berkshire farmer farming on DNRC land and working with Land for Good on a lease. So it's going to bring it all full circle. We're going to feed you for free. There still are some spots left. So please do take this home, share this with farmers in your community. And lastly, we ask that you please not leave. This is your ticket to leave. We have a very quick just feedback survey, whether you're a farmer or not. For anyone, we love feedback on this conversation, and especially if you're someone who would like to be followed up with by any of us or somebody else we can connect you with. Please do note that and leave your name and the best way we can get in touch with you, because we'd love to follow up if you have any further questions, especially if you're a farmer and you want any of us to come talk to you. Please do fill this out. And then again, at 1 o'clock, we're going to have sort of a networking farmer service provider hangout right back in this space. There will somehow be more tables in here, more materials, and we're all going to schmooze, and you can ask us any further questions that you have. We're sorry we didn't get to everybody, but thank you everyone who's here. Thank you.
The next coming result behind the desk, you'll find out. And then at 11 o'clock in this room, we have Bolshevik processing it upstairs.
Oh yeah, don't be late.